Hi, everybody. Thanks for sticking around. Thursday at a conference like this is, you're all troopers. Well, today we're talking about something that I think is a microcosm of this entire event. We have collected about 15 to 20,000 people around Times Square and various different properties at this conference to talk about NFTs. But I think the takeaway that most of us have gotten is that brands, for better or for worse, are trying out this new tech. They're trying out Web3. And when I say for better or for worse, you've seen some protests outside saying that God hates NFTs. And the reason they say that is because there's been some legitimate backlash. But the experts here today know what authenticity means. It's not a buzzword. So I'd love everyone here to introduce themselves a little bit, and then we'll take it from there. Yeah.
Okay. Hi, I'm Christopher Sealey. I'm the creative director and head of NFTs for OneOf, and we are a music, sports, and culture NFT platform. And we're really trying to bring the next 100 million non-crypto natives, the fans, to blockchain through the passion points in their daily lives. And we're trying to reduce the friction of getting involved in the NFT game by allowing people to sign up in 2 minutes with an email and a phone, setting price points really low and letting people buy via credit, debit, and any myriad of wallets you may have out here. So thanks for having me.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Elfanbaum. I'm the creative director at Doodle Labs, not to be confused with Doodles. We're a powered by Art Blocks platform, which means we specialize in generative art, and we work with artists and brands and real-life brands to bring them to the space and sort of guide their way into the Web3 world.
Hi, I'm Chloe Janicki. I am head of Web3 and business development for deadmau5 and his management company 720. We do everything from brand development, project management, partnership deals, etc. That falls within Web3.
So as you can see, 3 very different backgrounds, but all of them have been struggling and succeeding at making Web3 authentic for marquee brands. Let's talk a little bit about OneOf. Let's start there. So OneOf, to me, became quite famous with the launch of many of the top musicians in the world, Doja Cat, for example, who were trying to figure out how to go and embrace a new audience, the new internet that's being premiered right now. How have you done that? How have you been able to work with some of the leading artists and help them figure out not only who their audiences are, but what types of things should be packaged in NFT format, sold, and the like?
Well, I think it starts from the top. I mean, the thing that I love about the OneOf team is that we have a whole side of the room that are technologists and Web3 experts, but a lot of us on the IP side actually come from the creative backgrounds. Quincy Jones is our founding partner, right? So there's a trust level there with the most iconic artists in the world that really makes our job easy. And then our job is to get together with these artists and just figure out how they can enter into the world really open-handed in the spirit of Web3. I think this is especially important also for brands because what we all realize being at this conference is really the transformative power of NFTs and blockchain technology. But I think we also all realize being in this industry that it's quite small, right? So you have this fiercely independent, creator-driven microeconomy that's sending shockwaves globally. But artists and brands and me and you and everybody in this room need to enter into that community providing value with humility and understanding the tribal customs of that community. So it's definitely been
Let's underscore that. You said the tribal customs of that community.
Yes.
Can you double click on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, listen, we all came here probably somehow, some way, because we believe that we should be driving a creator economy where the people with the talent, the people with the inspiration, whether it's deadmau5 or a visual artist or an athlete, the people that we are passionate about, they create the emotionally resonant connection with us. And all we want to do as fans is sit on the same side of the table with them, get as close as we can to them, and maybe through this Web3 technology, support them in a way where now instead of just having a parasocial relationship with my heroes, I'm actually working with them to help advance them, and we're creating value and culture together. And I think that artists that don't understand that, or brands that don't understand that, will invariably face backlash. And I think those that do will be welcomed because we're all here as creators and we're co-creating. And just because someone is a multi-platinum recording artist versus a really incredible 3D animator doesn't mean that one is more or less valuable in the ecosystem. And I think that's really the magic of what we're doing here.
So you see a super-powered symbiotic relationship between fans and artists.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm wearing this Biggie t-shirt, right? We're doing the first ever NFT with the Biggie Smalls estate. And it's going to be an incredibly authentic PFP collection. I'm spending countless hours with Biggie's family, getting the details right, developing Easter eggs that only the biggest Biggie fan would care about, but that would really touch them. But what we're also doing that makes it interesting is we're taking his first ever freestyle, this famous Fulton Street freestyle, where the whole world saw not just an accomplished rapper, but someone who might change the face of music. And we are doing what we think Biggie would do. We're giving it to his fans. So owners of these PFPs will have an ownership share of this freestyle, and they will collectively determine what to do with it, whether it's giving it to other artists to remix and say that they can feature Biggie on their track, sending it to any number of DSPs and streaming platforms. They are actually creating new life with this IP. And the reason we call the collection Sky's the Limit is not just the obvious inference to the Biggie song. It's because in the same way that video, which you should all see if you haven't, really shows something that's about to change and change music, we really hope that this type of relationship that we're trying to pioneer is a watershed moment for crypto when we look back on it.
Well, deadmau5 has been investigating this space since the very beginning. I saw him probably lurking on forums back in 2014, 2015 when I entered the space. How have you been embracing Web3?
That's a great question. We try and do as many things as possible because I don't think anyone actually knows what the be all and end all will be in the next 5 years. So we're trying to stay as agnostic as possible when we're approaching different projects and platforms. Joel has always been a really heavyweight in the tech space at the intersection of tech and music. And I think, taking his first steps into the NFT space, probably, I think it was the end of 2020, on the Wax blockchain, that was kind of an eye-opening thing where it was like, Joel is already this really independent artist. He prides himself in being able to do everything himself. And then the blockchain was kind of just a way for him to extend that ability. And then also, he's a really smart guy. He's very clever and he likes experimenting and trying new things. And so, yeah, it's really just been about, staying true to what he believes in, staying authentic to his brand and doing things that, he thinks is going to push the envelope. How
has fan response been?
Well, that's also a very good question. I think, every brand is seeing it right now. There's always a little bit of backlash. Crypto, NFT, Web3, utility, these are all really, I don't know, they're buzzwords, I think. And so when people who are non-crypto natives see them, they kind of go, I don't really know if I want to do that. Oh, it's a Ponzi scheme. Oh, it's, scary. So
I'm actually really glad you're bringing this up because we should not be in the bubble and just convince ourselves that utility is something that everyone understands.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so but look, you represent your artists millions and millions of fans, I would say. So how are you actually thinking this through, and how are you going to communicate things like the concept of utility or what a continuous community requires over time within an NFT project?
Yeah, I think it's just actions speak louder than words. A lot of what we're doing is educating people in the space. So, we're making sure that when we're, I don't want to say shilling a project, but when we're promoting a project, it's not just like a shameless shill. We're really making sure that our fans and our audience understand what it is exactly that we're doing and how we're going to be continuing to create the value that they're, capturing in our ecosystem. So
you've actually had at least, you've had some really successful launches so far. Can you tell us a little bit about those? Because the audience here may not be as...
Yeah, totally. We've had successful and we've also had, arguably unsuccessful. I think, the thing is to keep in mind with any project that we're doing is that we're creating something for our audience as well as trying to bring a new audience in. So, one of the projects we did was a PFP project on Polygon, which arguably, a lot of people don't see the, flippability of a Polygon asset or, the speculation within a Polygon asset, but the way that we saw it and the way that we approach that project is that we're actually not creating these PFPs to be flippable or to be, again, a speculative asset. deadmau5 is huge in the gaming space, and so far, in terms of all the NFTs and blockchains that we've been working with, Polygon was the best option for us to be able to do an avatar project that could essentially be interoperable in the metaverse for any sort of gaming, play to earn, learn to earn, etc. And so now we're integrating, or we've already integrated with Ready Player Me with that asset. We will be integrating with the Sandbox, which is confirmed, and then Decentraland will be after that. So I think when you go and create a project, you have to think about what is the goal of this and how am I going to make it really accessible for my fans. So that's at least one project, and one that was maybe a little bit more successful, arguably, is all of the artist collaborations that we've done. So stuff with Mad Dog Jones, stuff with all the Nifty Gateway drops that we did, and yeah, I mean we've done a lot. It's kind of hard to keep track sometimes, but yeah, I think there's something for everyone, and there's also so many different things to try out. And as long as you keep true to what it is that you're trying to do with your brand, I think you'll always be successful. So yeah.
Well, at Doodle Labs, you guys have been spending a lot of time, of course, on generative art and trying to figure out how generative art is going to impact brands. So, and as a creative director, I'm sure you're thinking through the mechanics of that. But even before we get to the logistics, what's the strategy? I know you've actually worked with some brands directly. How have you helped them think through their problem set, and how do you help them determine that generative art might be the way forwards?
Yeah, so working with brands, it's really different than working with artists. There's a lot of people involved and a lot of brand assets, and with generative art, there's an element of surprise. There's an element of sort of the uncontrolled. We do a lot of testing to make sure there's nothing that is completely surprising that comes out, but because we do things via algorithm, there's ratios and there's chances, and we actually don't know what's going to come out the day of mint, because all of our NFTs are generated on demand when the collector mints them. So helping walk brands through that and sort of understand that, hey, I can't put your JPEGs on blockchain in the way that we do it. We're going to be sort of reinterpreting your assets and reinterpreting your brand through the lens of generative art, and sort of coming to terms with what that means. And when you find a brand or artist that understands that and sees the possibilities, that's really where the magic is.
And so can you give us an example of a brand perhaps that you've worked with?
Yeah, so we worked with White Castle on their Sliderverse project. So this was a collaboration we put together with Che Yu Wu, who is a super talented generative artist in the space. And so by doing that collaboration, when we first sort of guided their entrance in, we worked with them to purchase an ENS domain to sort of announce their entrance into Web3, and they also bought a Sailobot, which is one of Che Yu's most notable projects. And so by making that their avatar, it sort of signaled into the world in an authentic way. We're here, we understand what this community is. It's a very different impact than buying a Bored Ape and putting that as your avatar, and sort of signaled to the generative art community that they understand, and that they're working in the space and working to build it, and producing some incredible, groundbreaking art.
I've got some of the leading experts in the world on the stage, so I have to ask. We've seen Spotify take over the entire music industry in many ways. Streaming has become the way that everyone listens to music today. But I've heard a lot of pushback from artists. They are looking for a better pathway forwards. Have you thought with, perhaps at 720, better ways to monetize music going forwards?
I knew you were going to ask this question. Yes, we have. I mean, Spotify worked for a lot of really great reasons, one of which was, if you're an independent artist who never really had a chance of getting your music blasted out where, you could get playlisted and potentially reach a much larger audience than what you would have reached on your own. But obviously that doesn't work as much as it does to this day in terms of some independent acts, because they're not going to be earning as much revenue as they could be if they were, let's say, selling CDs or vinyl or et cetera, which again, takes an audience, but still is, I don't know. I'm not a huge proponent of Spotify. I think some of the monetization that we're seeing within the NFT communities and NFT space and platforms is much more fruitful, not just because of, being financially stable, but also because you have direct access to your community and your following. Something like a Spotify, they gatekeep your data, so you don't actually know who it is exactly that's listening to your music, and you don't know how to reach those people in a really meaningful way, unless you're like a Drake or a Beyonce. So I think there's two plus sides to working in an NFT ecosystem with your music, one of which is obviously being able to see the upside of, putting something on chain, value-wise, and then also the value of being able to contact and, directly communicate with your community and the people that are actually listening to your music.
Well, let's spend some time talking about that. So at OneOf, you work with some of the leading artists in the world. Have they found that their relationships with fans are getting stickier after working with OneOf?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think that, you know, I worked as an artist manager in careers prior to this, and I tend to think of the way artists can create community and value more holistically. So for me, you know, I'm a big fan of Spotify, actually, because I think what you can leverage as an artist by the plays and playlists of others can really help you. But it's definitely not the most efficient way to drive revenue from your tracks. And so I think about NFTs as a better revenue opportunity, but that can play nicely. You know, you got to fish where the fish are. But I think that what you're doing is you can go deeper. You know, at one point a brand came to us and said, we've got this major artist. We want to use NFTs to reach the most people, more people than social media. And we want to do it for the biggest event in the world. And we sort of said to them, well, that's not what NFTs are. I mean, that's a passive Instagram-like. And there's a place for that, just as there is for Spotify. What we said to them is, what you can do with NFTs is you can create a relationship. You know, when an artist mints an NFT on our site, or a brand does, they think that what they're doing at times is just selling an asset that people have emotional attachment to and perhaps financial interest in. But what they're actually doing is they're creating a covenant. They're sharing a custodial wallet with the fan directly through our platform. And with any luck, that wallet has an asset that that fan really cares a lot about, emotionally, financially, and otherwise. So you have such intimacy, and when you have big artists, you can scale that intimacy, right? And that, to me, is the promise of Web3. It's not just us creating communities to support artists. It's artists having a very direct and highly intimate relationship with their top fans who are passionate enough about them to follow them and forward-thinking enough to get an NFT. And so for me, it's the depth of engagement, and that's why these things can live alongside some of the more traditional means, you know, with our respective strengths.
Well, let's take this into brands. So brands have a problem very often. They need to appear innovative, even if they're selling the same exact product they were yesterday. And I know that Doodle Labs, of course, has had an opportunity to work with some, but brands are very concerned that they might not be deemed authentic in this space. At of course, you're exploring this all the time. How do you think you can help a brand understand what authenticity means vis-a-vis Web3?
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's a learning process for everybody, right? When you deal with these big brands, they have macro global objectives that you can't see in the context of a small campaign. But I think it goes back to how you enter the space. You know, if you want to be welcomed into a room, you don't kick the door down and insult people and just, you know, create some stunt so everyone looks at you. And I think that's a sort of a loose analogy, but it's a mistake that brands would make. I think that, you know, we are all here because of the passion of people who essentially wanted to create value and art outside existing gallery systems, outside existing technology systems, and outside existing power structures. They have done such a good job of that this is becoming a power structure, but let's not ignore sort of the indie record store vibe that makes us all excited to be here. And brands need to come humbly because they're not a natural participant in that. But they can be if they're culture adjacent, if they work with people like deadmau5, if they do interesting things with your thing, if they really say, hey, I'm here to contribute to this community, and I hope that through my contribution, you will see the value I bring and my brand will be burnished. Not, hey, I'm here to throw money at it and say I'm here, because that would be about as well received as someone who kicks the door and says, look at me.
So all of you are really on the creative side, as it turns out. But I have to ask the other part of this, which is the tech here? That is to say, is the technology today good enough to maximize engagement with fans and communities? Any of you? Yeah, Chloe.
I think it's getting there. I think we still have a little bit of a way to go. I mean, I'm not sure what the most recent percentage is as of today, but I know it's a very, very low amount of the global population that's actually active in the blockchain space and the community. So I think once we start to see, you know, that percentage start to creep up and mass adoption starts to, you know, become easier and easier, we're going to see a lot more creatives, a lot more, you know, technologically savvy people start to contribute and start to grow it even further. I think we've seen tech grow at an astronomical rate in the last 5 years, and I think it's going to continue to exponentially grow quicker and quicker.
What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're still super early. So the tech is here, but it's not super accessible to the general public yet. And brands are really, you know, they want to get into the space, but it's also how do you communicate to the brand's audience? Because you know, at Doodle Labs, we have a really strong community and people that are really excited about our projects, but when you're reaching out into the brand space, how do you reach their customers and how do you communicate? Yeah,
it's their customers.
Right.
I mean, they might be fans of Doodle Labs, but I mean, White Castle, for example, has a very, very active and rabid fan base all over the United States.
Right, and so it's figuring out how to reach out to them, how to communicate sort of what an NFT is, what is the value of this NFT and how does it allow them to engage with White Castle in a new way.
So wait, I just want to make sure I understand. If I bought one of those Sliderverse NFTs, do I get something at White Castle? Is it redeemable?
We're in the process of it.
Okay.
With brands, we found that it's a much longer timeline.
So I can
to
eat
move
my
things
NFTs
forward.
basically? Is that what's
That's the
happening
plan
here?
for the future.
Okay.
But yeah, it's definitely a different experience working with brands because it is just a different timeline and getting them into this Web3 world where a day is a week and a week is a month and a month is a year. You know, it's a lot of pushing, but what we're doing here now is we've learned that, you know, moving into each project, we sort of need to approach it with a playbook of, you know, this is what's expected from us and this is you as a brand, what is going to sort of pave your way for the next year or two.
Okay. So there's a playbook here. Is that right? Do you think there's a playbook to engaging in Web3 for brands?
Yes, but it's an ever-changing playbook.
Yeah.
It's something that is going to be unique to each brand and their community. You know, someone who's a fan of Deadmau5 may not be a fan of someone that's a, Doja Cat or Quincy Jones or whatever it might be, right? So
Everyone's a fan of Quincy Jones, but that's a different story.
Yes, probably. But no, I was gonna say, like, you really have to like analyze your following, why they are your following, and what it is that you're trying to do with your brand outside of just your following. Are you a creative? Are you tech forward? What do you want to achieve in this space? And then you start weaving in these Web3 principles within that. I think, for a new brand coming into the space, you can't just say, I want to do an NFT project to do an NFT project and say that I'm a part of it. I think, Chris, you spoke to that really well, is that, you have to think about yourself, your brand, your artists, outside of all of this, Web3 stuff, what it is you're trying to achieve, and again, how you start to interweave these principles into what you're doing.
So one concern I have is that not every brand that's entering crypto or Web3 understands that there is a very, very long time expectancy that you should be responsible for the relationship with your fans. Chris, you said something earlier that struck a chord with me. You said that essentially the entrance of a brand into Web3 forced them to create a covenant with their fans. What do you mean by that exactly?
Yeah, I mean, listen, all brands talk about is wanting to identify their sort of most valuable customers and engage them, right? And engagement is yet another word used far too often with far too little meaning.
All right, so what does that mean in this space?
Yeah, it means that, listen, I have given you an asset adjacent to tech and culture that you love. Don't stop there. It means give me more assets. It means ask me questions, make me your partner in exploring this world. Because if I'm a supporter of your brand and I'm willing to take that leap with you, make me your co-creator and evangelist, because we are here because of a co-creating spirit. And brands shouldn't be dictating, they should be inviting collaboration.
That is a really tough challenge for brands that are very large entities sometimes that have a lot to lose.
But they are doing it.
They're doing it.
And I would like to just add one word that I don't think I've heard at all throughout these last 25 minutes is DAOs. I think we're going to see a lot of businesses, brands, artists, et cetera, put forward their estate, et cetera, to basically be fractionalized and be, part owned by your community, which will then make the decisions in terms of, if you're the highest holder, you will be able to dictate this, you'll be able to organize this. And we'll see a lot more contribution that way, because essentially the value that you're creating for those people, those community holders, is going to, reward them tenfold by just participating.
Well, there you heard it. The democratization of brands is upon us, and it's because of NFTs. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.